Hello and welcome to Tech Raven. I'm Nigel and today I'm going to be tackling the subject of a Canon digital mirrorless medium format stills camera system, why they don't make one, and is there one in the pipeline. Now I've got a couple of contacts at Canon and recently I've had two conversations with both of them, and when I put to them Canon should be developing a medium format camera system to compete with Fuji and Hasselblad, that statement was met with what I interpreted as something of an uncomfortable silence followed by a rather garbled response. Now, this could have just been in my mind, or it could be that there was a silence at the end of the phone for a minute due to the fact that they could have been thinking, that's a good idea, maybe I'll pitch that to Japan. Or were they under NDA and maybe they know something I don't? This is speculation on my part, of course, but I do find it very hard to believe that Canon aren't looking into a digital medium format mirrorless camera system at the time of making this video, which is September 2024. Now, Canon have been around since the 1930s, 1937 I think it was. Back then, they were concentrating more on rangefinder cameras. I think one of their first cameras was a copy of the Leica 3. And that's what Canon decided to do. Now, back in the 30s and 40s, the medium format 120 camera system was more popular because it was superior in image quality, as we all know. But Canon, being forward thinking even back then, were going after the amateur market with 35mm, and they stuck to it for many years with their rangefinder camera system. Now back then, even Kodak made a medium format 120 camera with the Brownie, a plastic device. So they were very popular. The only people that were going for 35mm were people that absolutely required a smaller, lighter, more portable system. In the 1940s, even Mamiya started to develop a superior and back then revolutionary medium format system with the Mamiya Flex that would ultimately kill off the unwieldy Greyflex Speed graphic, which had been around since the early 1940s. And even then, Canon didn't want to entertain medium format. Now, if we actually come forward to, say, the 1980s, Canon were concentrating on their professional range and amateur range of 35mm cameras. They had the Canon F1, and then of course they had the Canon A1, the AE1 Programme, and cameras like that. So they had a fantastic range of 35mm stills cameras and great FD lenses to compete with Nikon's system, which would have been the Nikon F3 and then cameras like the F8, FE2 and FM2. So there were some great 35mm systems, not to mention those from the likes of Pentax and Olympus and Leica and a few others. But also back then, there was a great range of medium format cameras. We had the likes of the Hasselblad 500cm with those great Carl Zeiss lenses. There was the Mamiya RB67 and then later the RZ67 Pro 2 electronic medium format cameras. Bronica had the SQ, which was a 2¼ square camera to compete with Hasselblad, and they even had the Bronica ETRS, which was a 645 system. And then of course Pentax had a 645 system as well, and they even had the great 6.7 camera that the likes of Donovan used to use. And then of course there was the mighty Fuji GX680II. So there were plenty of mates and models on offer during the 80s for medium format. So even then I can understand why Canon wouldn't look into that market, because I wouldn't say it was saturated, because there was plenty on offer and those brands had been established for many years in the medium format market already. But it wasn't just Canon that weren't entertaining medium format either. Nikon weren't entertaining it, and Olympus, they weren't looking at it either, and nor were Leica. So it's not just Canon, but sticking with Canon, I can understand why they didn't look at that market, because there's already plenty on offer. And it could be argued that with it being a kind of a niche market, Canon was still going to concentrate on the 35mm, where there's more of a market, more cameras are going to get sold, and hence more money is going to get made. But if we roll forward to today, September 2024, at the time of making this video, there's not an awful lot of choice in the medium format market. Film is dead, as we know, for the most part, but when it comes to digital cameras and medium format, there's only really a couple of choices. Well, three. You've got the Phase 1, you've got the Fuji, and of course you've got the Hasselblad. Now, Phase 1, that's a bit of a niche market because they're very expensive. I mean, I can't imagine Phase 1 selling many XF cameras and IQ4 backs, because an XF camera with an IQ4 150 megapixel back and a prism and a lens is going to come in at about £40,000 brand new, or maybe 25 grand if you can find a slightly older one second hand. Very expensive and very niche. And I'd imagine in majority of the cases, those cameras, being a tool, they're just hired in for any given high-end commercial job anyway. And then we've got the Hasselblad. We've got the X1D, more recently the X2D 100 megapixel, which comes in at about £7,500, £8,000, depending where you look. And then the lenses range from about £2,500 up to about £5,000 each. So it's not cheap, but it's a very good system. But that is not without its flaws, as I've covered in another video, because Hasselblad have had their electrical gremlins in the past with like the H5, and then they had the problems with the fold-out screen on the back of one of their cameras, and lots of those had to go back to Sweden to be repaired. So, you know, from a reliability point of view, yes, Hasselblad are very good, but they're not without their gremlins. And as I've already covered in another video, they've closed down pretty much all of their service centres around the world, certainly in the UK and Europe. So any Hasselblad has got to go back to Sweden. And that is a bit of a ball ache. It takes quite a while and it's quite expensive, not only for the repair, but because of the customs and everything that goes with it. So I'm not thrilled about that, which basically leaves the Fuji. Now, of course, the latest Fuji GX680II comes in only about £300 cheaper than the Hasselblad X2D, so those two cameras are similar in price. Like I said, the Fuji just a few £100 cheaper, but the Fuji lenses are cheaper by 20 or 30%, and that's why a lot of people are getting into the Fuji. And of course, the Fuji and the Hasselblad both use the exact same Sony-made 100 megapixel sensor. So the image quality, arguably, is about the same on both, with just very slight differences in colour science between the two. But the Fuji, that's a no-go for me also, because I just can't get that weak base plate out of my mind on the Fuji medium format cameras. I've covered that in another video as well, where the base plate is made out of some sort of cast metal. It's very thin, what they call monkey metal in the trade. And if you snap it, it kind of like looks like a crunchy bar inside. It's got all these air pockets and it's very brittle. And there's been instances where those base plates have snapped and cracked. The camera's fallen off a tripod and the part of the plate from the bottom of the camera has stayed on the camera tripod itself. So for me personally, and I do stress that this is for me personally, this is the reasons I wouldn't entertain any of these medium format cameras. Phase 1, just too expensive. Hasselblad, no service facilities except having to go back to Sweden, which means being without a camera for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and the expense of repairing it is going to be about £3,000 or £4,000 minimum just to replace the sensor on that camera, because the sensor is about half the price of the camera. Could be argued it's the same with the Fuji, but at least with Fuji, if I ring them up in England, they'll pick up the phone and say hello. I can drive down the road about 1 hour and they will fix it for me here. So the servicing on the Fuji is better, but it's that base plate and some iffy build quality in certain other areas that would lead me to not go for that camera either. So for me, the perfect medium format camera system doesn't exist. And given there's only 3 of them, the Phase 1, very expensive, the Hasselblad and the Fuji, there's definitely room here for Canon to make a splash in the medium format mirrorless camera market. And a big splash it would be too. Now, some of you may still be saying, but it's still a niche market and Canon aren't interested in that. And my reply to that is just look at the Canon cinema cameras. The EOS C300, the EOS C400 and the recent C80, for example. So Canon have gone after red and black magic with the cinema camera market, and they are doing it very well. They've made a big splash and they make some fantastic cameras. So surely Canon with their cinema cameras is even more niche than a Canon medium format mirrorless camera system. I'm just speculating here, but I would imagine if Canon did bring out a medium format mirrorless camera system to compete with Fuji and Hasselblad, they would take a huge slice away from Fuji, and they would certainly take a huge slice away from Hasselblad and Phase 1 as well. So I can't quite understand why this isn't on the market today, right now, because they would certainly sell more medium format cameras than they do their cinema cameras. Now, Canon are huge. It could be argued that they are the biggest camera maker in the world. They've got so much access to so much technology, great R&D. They've got teams of people all around the world, some of the best designers ever. I mean, if you just go back and have a look at one of those first Canon mini DV cameras, the white one, it was a great design, interchangeable lenses, and that was fantastic. So Canon can do this. They've got great people all around the world. And I know that they've looked at the medium format camera market many times over the past 20, 30, 40 years. But today, in my opinion, this is the time that they need to make a splash. Are they doing something in the background right now that we don't know about? They might be, they might not be. But would you like to see a Canon medium format digital camera system to compete with Fuji and Hasselblad? I know I would, because for me, it would be the best option. Why? Well, let me think about that. First of all, there's the build quality. The build quality would be fantastic. Canon have got a reputation for reliability and build. They have service centers all around the world, and they've got great customer support. Now, with regard to pricing, I suspect a Canon medium format system would be a little bit more expensive than the Fuji. I think it would be on a par with Hasselblad if this came out, and this is speculation here. They can certainly do it. They could use the same sensor to begin with that both Fuji and Hasselblad use, that Sony-made sensor. They can certainly make the lenses because they make great lenses. Just look at their cinema lenses. They could even have a leaf shutter lens system, which is what the Hasselblad medium format system uses, rather than the focal plane shutter of the Fuji. And I would like to see Canon do that if they ever did bring out a medium format camera, because then we could do the flash sync speed at any speed we wanted. Canon wouldn't even have to make the leaf shutter. They could just use the same one that Hasselblad use. After all, Hasselblad don't make their leaf shutters, and they don't even make their own lenses. So Canon could definitely do that. So would you like to see this? Leave some comments below. Now, I would love you to spread this video around, not just so I can get more likes and more views, because I'm not bothered about all that stuff, but I just like the idea of somebody at Canon in Japan, somebody that's got the authority to start talking and spreading this around. I would like those kind of people to actually see this video, because now is definitely the time for Canon to get into medium format. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You've been watching Tech Raven. I'm Nigel. Until the next one, bye for now.